In 1991, a sailboat was abandoned by its crew in the middle of one of the worst Atlantic storms in decades. Days later, the Coast Guard found it floating, largely undamaged. That boat cost less than $50,000 on the used market last week. In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly which boat that was, plus 4 more under $50,000 that are built the same way. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. You're watching Sailboat Insider. Let's get into it. There are roughly 5,000 to 7,000 used sailboats listed for sale in the United States right now. On the major platforms alone, that number climbs past 10,000 when you count private listings, regional sites, and Craigslist. The median price is $12,500. Let that number sit for a second. $12,500 is less than a used pickup truck. It is less than some people spend on a kitchen renovation, and it is the price at which more than half the sailboats in this country change hands. Now here's the number nobody talks about. After 10 years of ownership, the average mass production sailboat from the 1980s depreciates to roughly $100 per foot. That is $4,000 for a 40-footer, for a boat that someone paid $60,000 for new. But there is another group of boats where the math runs completely in the other direction, where a 30-year-old hull is worth more today than it was worth a decade ago, where buyers compete for listings. Before we get into the list, you need to understand one thing about how sailboats are built. The fiberglass era began in the late 1950s and took over the market through the 1960s and 1970s. And in those early decades, builders did not know exactly how much fiberglass was enough. So they guessed, and most of them guessed high. The result was a generation of hulls that were genuinely overbuilt. Thick laminates, heavy displacement, conservative designs that put strength ahead of speed. Boats that were built the way you build something when you are not entirely sure what you are doing and you want a safety margin. Then the 1980s arrived. Builders figured out exactly how much fiberglass they needed, and they started using exactly that much, not more. Number 5, the Cape Dory 36. Carl Ahlberg was a Finnish-American naval architect who spent decades designing boats that looked like they were carved by someone who genuinely loved the sea. The Cape Dory 36 is one of his finest production designs. Full keel, moderate displacement, solid fiberglass hull. A rig that is conservative and manageable and honest. Cape Dory built these boats from the late 1970s through 2001. The company is no longer in business. There are no new ones coming, and that scarcity is exactly what protects the value of the ones that exist. Right now there are 6 Cape Dory 36s listed on the major platforms. Starting price is $36,500. The average asking price is $63,000. That spread tells you something. When a Cape Dory 36 comes up in good condition near your budget, you move quickly. What you are buying is a boat with active owner communities, documented repair history on most examples, and a hull that has virtually no structural horror stories in 50 years of sailing. The chain plates are external, which means you can inspect them. The full keel means the rudder is protected. The solid fiberglass below the waterline means no core to absorb water and rot from the inside. The honest red flag on this boat is age. Anything built in 1979 is now approaching 50 years old. Budget realistically for engine, electrical, and standing rigging before you make an offer. But the structure itself? Carl Ahlberg built boats for the long haul. This is one of them. Number 4, the Hans Christian 33. Taiwan in the 70s and 80s produced some of the best built production sailboats ever sold at accessible prices. The Hans Christian 33 is arguably the finest example of that tradition. 168 hulls were built between 1980 and 2018. 40 years of continuous production. Full keel, heavy displacement, hand-laid fiberglass throughout. The kind of construction that makes surveyors put down their moisture meters and just nod. The Hans Christian 33 weighs 19,000 pounds. For a 33-foot boat, that is a significant displacement to length ratio. What it means in practice is a boat that moves through chop rather than over it. A boat that is slow, stable, and deeply reassuring in conditions that would make a lighter boat uncomfortable. Number 3, The Morgan 38. Charles Morgan was one of the most important sailboat designers in American history. His Out Island series, built from the early 70s through the 80s, was designed for real-world use in real-world conditions. Charter fleets, family cruising, extended time away from marinas. The construction philosophy was simple. Use more material than you think you need. The early hulls were built with doubled and tripled layup in the stress areas. The result was a boat that the sailing community consistently describes as bulletproof. Right now, there are 33 Morgan 38s listed on the major platforms. Median asking price is $35,900. That puts this boat squarely in the middle of our budget range with real availability. The long keel with a protected rudder. The cockpit is large and practical. The interior was designed for extended living. The honest limitation is speed. You are not going to impress anyone on a Morgan 38. In light air, it can feel like pushing a bathtub, but when the wind builds and the sea picks up, you will be glad you are on a heavy boat with a protected rudder and a hull that was built with more fiberglass than it technically needed. That covers the under $40,000 range. But the next two boats are where the real long-term value story gets interesting. Number 2, the Tayana 37. Robert Perry is one of the most respected naval architects in offshore sailing. He designed the Tayana 37 in 1976 for the Taiyang shipyard in Taiwan. 588 hulls were built. The design was still available for orders as recently as 2020. Think about that. A hull design from 1976 that the market continued to demand for 44 years. That does not happen by accident. The Tayana 37 is a cutter-rigged sloop with a modified full keel. Displacement is 22,500 pounds. She is heavy, conservative, and built to go places rather than win races. The laminate is hand-laid fiberglass throughout. The hardware is typically oversized. The rigging geometry is designed for short-handed sailing. Right now, there are 16 Tayana 37s listed for sale. Prices run from $29,000 to just under $60,000. That is almost exactly at our $50,000 budget. With reasonable negotiation on a well-maintained example, this boat is accessible. The honest red flag is the teak deck. Many Tayana 37s were built with traditional teak decking. Teak decks look extraordinary for the first 15 years. After that, they become a maintenance obligation. Budget between $15,000 and $25,000 to replace a teak deck. Inspect carefully before you buy. A dry, well-maintained teak deck is fine. A saturated, leaking teak deck is a different conversation entirely. But the hull underneath that deck, Robert Perry designed it right the first time. That is why buyers have been finding these boats for 50 years and sailing them for another 20 after that. And then there's the number 1 boat on this list. The one where the story of longevity is not just documented, it is legendary. The Westsail 32. In 1991, a storm formed off the coast of Nova Scotia. It became one of the most powerful storms to hit the North Atlantic in decades. It destroyed several vessels and killed sailors who were caught in its path. One of those boats was the Westsail 32, named Satori. The crew abandoned ship in the worst of the storm. The Coast Guard later found Satori floating, largely undamaged. The boat had survived conditions that ended human lives. It kept sailing. The hull is hand-laid fiberglass in 12 layers. Displacement is around 20,000 pounds. She carries 7,000 pounds of encapsulated lead ballast. There are no keel bolts to fail because the ballast is sealed inside the hull. The stability ratio exceeds the threshold that offshore certification bodies use to define survivability in extreme conditions. This boat was designed in the early 1970s as a pure ocean passage maker, and the construction reflects that mission without compromise. On the used market right now, Westsail 32s are available for between $25,000 and $55,000. There are fewer than 10 listed globally at any given time. When one comes up, it moves. This boat is slow. In light air, she can be genuinely frustrating. The other limitation is age. These hulls are now 50 years old. The structure is fine. Everything else requires inspection and often replacement. Treat the asking price as the starting point. Budget another $10,000 to $15,000 before you consider this boat ready to sail. But that structure, 12 layers of hand-laid fiberglass built by people who were not sure how much was enough, so they used more. The ocean tested that decision in 1991. The ocean lost. Here is the bottom line. The used sailboat market under $50,000 contains extraordinary value. It also contains a lot of boats that look like extraordinary value and are not. The boats on the good list share 4 things. They were built when builders were still guessing at scantlings and guessing high. They have full or modified full keels that protect the rudder and provide directional stability. They have solid fiberglass hulls without problematic core materials below the waterline. And they have owner communities that have been maintaining institutional knowledge about these boats for decades. If you have $50,000 and a serious interest in owning a sailboat for the next 30 years, start with the Tayana 37. It has the most listings, the broadest price range, and the longest continuous production history of anything on this list. If you find one with a dry teat deck and a recent survey, you will spend less time at the boatyard and more time on the water. And if you ever find a clean Westsail 32 in your budget, buy it. The ocean already tested that boat for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We go deep on the used sailboat market every week, and the next video is one you will not want to skip.